People often ask me about whether it's possible to live in a world where costs are going down but we can still deliver quality. The sorts of things that I'd expect most finance functions in the public sector to be focusing on at the moment are things around making sure that people in the organisation have got the capability to manage finances, and making sure that processes are streamlined, making sure that they're as standard as they can be. Also making sure that financial policies are proportionate and fit for purpose. But also there's a lot about the operating model. So you do see a lot at the moment about collaboration, about how can we work beyond boundaries. And I think that's really quite important when budgets are driving down. People also think about making sure that the data that people have got to make decisions on is as clean as it can be, as accurate as it can be. You will see people talk a lot about single versions of the truth, and that's really important that an organisation has a single version of the truth, because these things are built on standard sets of processes, people doing the same thing, understanding what things have got to be done. If you put all those things together, you get a good information base. Once you've got the good information base, you can then start to make better business decisions, working with business leaders to make sure we can drive down waste and think more in a more focused way about value for money considerations. Putting all those things together means that, from my perspective, in one sense, it doesn't matter whether there's a lot of budget or less budget, because the financial management framework's in place in order to make sure people make good value for money decisions. I think it's been really difficult to achieve that overall framework in the past, because there's an awful lot in there, and it's not just about tackling each of those things individually. You have to deal with them as an integrated set of activities and actions. So as a consequence, I think what you'll see across all of the public sector, whether it's in Wales, Scotland, Ireland or England, what you'll see is finance functions and organisations just starting to scratch the surface of some really fundamental financial management issues. What we are seeing in Wales is a lot greater focus on value for money decision making and greater collaboration. That sort of says to me that people are starting to work in that space that says finance can actually add value to businesses, can actually work with business leaders in order to make sure we can make some good business decisions. I think back to my days as a newly qualified accountant in the 80s, where finance functions focused mostly on transaction processing, a lot of focus on compliance, and undertaking activities just to make sure the health of the organisation was right rather than adding any value. What you see now increasingly is, in a modern 21st century finance function, the finance professionals are taking a far more business partner role and working a lot more in order to add business insight to the organisation and decision making in the organisation. But of course, in order to do that, the finance people have got to free up their time in order to be able to provide the time and the thinking space to help the business make those better decisions. So the direction of travel needs to be more away from scorekeeping and the policing role and more towards business insight. The sorts of things that we've talked about before around more standard processes, single version of truth, these are all the tools that organisations need to put in place to enable the maturity of the organisation to develop in terms of financial management, to free up the time to do some better value-added thinking and decision-making. People ask me quite a lot about what I think is the greatest challenge facing the finance profession in the public sector in Wales at the moment. So for me, it's about ensuring we get a broader engagement of the finance professionals across the public sector as a whole, beyond the core finance functions, to make sure that the DNA of every organisation in the public sector in Wales think about financial management as being a key part of their process and their operations. To do that, we need to make sure that the corporate finance function is seen as an enabler, and more as an enabler than it is at the present, which is more of a policeman scorekeeper. And in order to achieve that success, we need to improve the visibility and the value of the finance function to make sure there's a sense of community around the finance community in the public sector of Wales, and to make sure that the finance community is seen by business leaders as helping them to make better business decisions. Health boards when they're thinking about the quality and the effectiveness of their finance function, should be looking at the quality of the data, the timeliness of the data, the support that their operational and policy leads are getting from the finance function in terms of to help them make decisions from a business perspective. And the quality of the dialogue around the health board itself should be less about challenges around accuracy of data and more about what's the data telling the board and what decisions do they need to make on the back of it. I think the sort of performance and financial information that the health board should be looking to its corporate finance function to provide could be broadly grouped into three areas: inputs, outputs and outcomes. So traditionally you'd like to see in the inputs lots of information about the unit cost of doing an activity. In the output side you'd like to think about the length of waiting list, the traditional sort of health performance measures that we see frequently in various journals and media outlets. But also increasingly modern finance functions are starting to think about outcomes. The Welsh Government started to focus its measures around what does the programme for government say in terms of the outcomes that it's delivering for the people of Wales. Those are the sorts of things that more external commentators, and in particular the people of Wales, will look to see whether changes that are being made are actually making a big difference to them. So for me there's a range of indicators that health boards should be focusing on, and at each area, input, output and outcome, the finance function should be really trying to drive that sort of data towards the board. What organisations should be starting to think about is about a strategic planning framework. So what you'd expect to see in a strategic planning framework is a strategic plan that covers 3 to 5 years. That's linked to a business plan that focuses on perhaps the next 12 to 18 months. The business plan needs to be built from the resource allocation or decisions around resource allocation, by which I mean not just money, but also about people, about IT, about location. A lot of the things that drive cost should also be captured in an overall resource allocation assessment. What you would then tie those three things together, the strategic plan, the business plan and the resource allocation exercise, would be with some performance measures. So what sort of things, how do you pull those four things together and tell you something about how successful the organisation's being? So I'd expect a strategic planning framework to be in place that connects those four things. And then what you wrap around that strategic planning framework is a framework for governance assurance, to make sure the right people in the right parts of the organisation have got the authority and the freedom to make the decisions in order to connect those four things up. And sitting right at the heart of that are the outcomes. What is it this organisation is trying to achieve?